Hey everybody, welcome back. Uh, we are going to kick it off tonight. We are starting the safety technology book, so welcome back to the CSST. We're going to be starting at the beginning of the safety technology book on section 75201. Excuse me one second. Give me 1 second, folks. Sorry about that. Alrighty, folks. Sorry about that. So welcome back, everyone. We're going to get it started. It's the safety technology book. We're starting it. It's going to be at the beginning now. We're on the safety technology book. We're going to start with module 75201 tonight on page 1.1. But first, let's go ahead and go through the table of contents, okay? Just so everybody knows what's in this book. So I'm going to Roman numeral 7 right at the very beginning of the book. And as you can tell, this book, it's got 18 different modules. Okay, we're going to do tonight. We're going to talk about the introduction to safety technology, maybe a little bit of hazard recognition, evaluation, and control. We'll get into that a little bit next week, and then we're going to start cruising through risk analysis, inspections, motivating employees, and then also safety plans and site-specific plans as well. And then, of course, emergency action plans, job safety analysis, task safety analysis, safety orientations and training, also work permits. We're going to be talking about hot work permits, but we're also going to go ahead and introduce confined space permits as well, okay? So just so you know, with hot work and then confined space right behind it. Also safety meetings, or we're going to go ahead and probably put a couple safety meeting plans together. We're also going to do 2 stages of accident investigation. We're going to do policies and procedures, and then again, data analysis, OSHA record keeping, inspection procedures, tracking and trending injuries, illnesses, and near misses, and then of course environmental awareness as well. Okay, so those are the 18 sections that we're going to be getting into over the course of the next few weeks to wrap up this book. Also, with this book, we're going to be working on some evaluations as well. So those are the 15 evaluations that I showed last week, and I will be working on those as well. Okay. So let's go ahead and get it cranked out, folks. I'm going to the Introduction to Safety Technology on page 1.1. And basically, you know, let's go ahead and start talking about the roles and responsibilities of safety technicians, right? At the bottom of page 1.1. Items that we need to remember is that safety technicians, we're going to have certain responsibilities, right? And certain responsibilities are going to include, you know, anytime that there's an absence of a site safety manager or supervisor, that we may be representing the company during visits by regulatory agencies like OSHA, EPA, DOT. There's nothing wrong, folks, to ask those regulators to wait, or at least to wait within a reasonable delay, so that we can possibly get somebody else from the organization that may be better qualified to walk them through. Okay, but if we do have that responsibility, we'll be talking in a lot of the 18 modules through this book will kind of guide us through much of it. Also providing safety training for both new and experienced workers as well. So we may be doing orientation training, safety training, tailgate training as well. So we may be doing some of those, okay? In addition, also participating in the developments, right? Or any type of review of JSAs, TSAs, so job safety analysis, task safety analysis. We also may be working on work plans, accident investigation forms, emergency action plans. A lot of us within our responsibility will also be tweaking out a lot of forms. I see a lot of organizations now where we're getting in and doing more of a site-specific and employer-specific safety and training plans. For whoever's out there tonight, let me know. Tell me, are you working on any type of? Are you reworking your safety plan? Either your global safety plan, site safety plans. Okay, good. Okay, so yeah, a couple of you are, a couple of you aren't. Yeah, and that tends to be the thing. So the biggest thing is I would do this is have the people who said no, have you reviewed them lately? Have you looked at your safety plans to make sure that they're aligning with, let's say, your clients? Let's say if you're working at a refinery, or let's say you're working at a manufacturing facility, right, or an industrial construction site. Have you done a cross comparison yet between your safety plans and the client's safety plan? Okay, good. Okay, Yeah, as long as you're aligning, you're great. And just remember, it's good to have a global plan, but then also site specific is very important. Okay, especially if we're working tend to work in relatively the same environments, it's going to be very simple. It's the ones where we may be changing industries or environments where the challenge may be created a little bit more. Okay, great. We also may have to audit and inspect job sites, or work activities. Also, possibly anticipating or identifying or having management correct hazards. Um, I do want you to remember this, folks. Right? Is that maybe this is a good time to talk about this? It's called REC, and it's mostly an industrial hygiene term. I think we talked about it when we did the little small safety orientation book, but it's called REC, and it stands for recognition, evaluation, and controls. So whenever we talk about hazard awareness, right, we talk about either hazardous conditions or hazardous behaviors. One of the most important things is we have to identify it. We have to recognize it in order to move forward. Once we've recognized it, then what we'll start doing is we'll start evaluating the work process, and then we'll also start evaluating what controls, what standards apply, so that we can take it from there as well. And then ultimately, we're going to wind up doing the evaluation, and then we're going to go ahead and control the hazard by implementing our engineering controls, our administrative controls, and our PPE as well. Okay. All right, good. In addition to that, we may be auditing for compliance requirements or corporate compliance as well. Knowing how to complete all required forms for our organization. Many of them are standardized forms. I mean, they may be in our own format for our company, but they're pretty much standard these days. Most of the tasks that we're conducting. Okay, I think we've become much better about becoming uniformed in this industry. Also, observing work in progress to make sure that employees are using safe work methods, making sure the conditions and behaviors are both safe. You've heard me mention that twice tonight. You've heard me talk about conditions and behaviors, so we'll kind of get into that either later on today or on next week as well. Also, using proper coaching techniques, right, to correct unsafe behavior and to reward safe behaviors as well, like kind of like maybe safety incentive programs to reward observing employees practicing safe practices, okay, and safe techniques. And in addition to that, also using conducting safety meetings, auditing compliance with work permits, auditing permit required confined spaces, maybe revisiting our permits from the previous 12 months to make sure that there are no significant changes. We definitely want to make sure that at a minimum we review all of our entry permits in our program, at least our programs, every 12 months to assure that there aren't any significant changes that we need to make, and also as well on a per entrance basis as well. If we identify any type of hazards that may be significant hazards that are recognized, we may want to go ahead and start taking preventative measures, right, or at least evaluating what our conditions are and what our options are. In addition to that, also assisting site managers in conducting incident investigations. We back in the day, we used to always pretty much conduct most of the incident investigations as safety. Now, as you've noticed more and more, you have more of the operations side doing it, and then we're kind of more of a mentor or coach, or a consultant basically within our own organization. So tell me out there, the people that are out there, when you have an injury in your workplace, are you still doing the majority of the incident reports? Or are they being done by a supervisor, and then we're taking kind of a back seat and kind of coaching and consulting with them to make sure that we get them on point? Who's actually conducting the initial investigation? Okay, good. Yeah, a couple of you, right? You are still okay. Some others, your leadership now, right, in the field. Okay, and then both, of course, as well. So yeah, okay. All right, I think you'll kind of see more and more segue. I think it's a little bit. I'd agree with. I'd say it's probably more both of us, but we're probably pretty much now we're doing it on a macro level, and we're having those supervisors do it on a micro level. Okay, if you agree, great, and if you don't, you may have a different practice, but you may see that may be more of the trend that's coming along. Also, assistant site management, supervisors, managers, and like I said, conducting any incident investigations, analyzing data, right? Basically putting data together. We had this discussion today. I'm actually teaching a 510 this week in New Orleans. And we were having this discussion today that you'll start to see many terms that are that are used in the human resources industry and are used more and more in the safety industry. One of the ones that we were talking about today was human development, right, or leadership development as well. And then also you may see, of course, we have our leading and lagging indicators, our KPIs, our key performance indicators. So different leadership and management styles that we're starting to see more and more as well. Okay, behavioral based. Um, Also, managing the site safety and health record keeping system could be record keeping for non OSHA related, like as far as non 300 related, and then of course our OSHA 300 log, 300A, and the summary and incident reports as well. Also, serving as a liaison possibly between the job site, insurance company representatives, government regulators, the client. So we could definitely be working as a liaison through with multiple different parties and stakeholders these days, and also providing and coordinating for first aid and access to follow-up medical care, case management. Of all of you that are out there tonight, who's doing case management? If you have injuries, are you involved in the case management side of the business? Okay, good. Okay. Yeah. Biggest thing to remember, right, is, first of all, we want to make sure that that employee gets adequate care. Another thing we also want to make sure also is that we make sure that we respect that employee's HIPAA rights to make sure that we keep any private information, all illness information, and whatever injury information that may be need to be kept quiet or kept private to make sure that we do so. Okay. Great. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on, and let's talk about some important safety-related terms as well. I'm at 3.0 on the bottom of page 1.2. And, obviously terms, there's your definition of safety, folks. What are we basically looking at, right? It's basically a general term. It's talking about an acceptable level of risk, okay, or relatively having a little bit of freedom from minimizing our risk to the probability of any harm. Also, it's controlling recognized hazards in order to attain an acceptable level of work, right, or acceptable level of risk. A lot of people have asked that, and I see that question comes up more and more over the last few years. What is our definition of safety? So, and let me tell you, I think that's one of those things where we have to kind of be able to describe what we do, right? You have a project manager, they can pretty much say what they do. A foreman, a supervisor, an attorney, a doctor, many people, an accountant, many people can often tell what they do. And for us, it seems to be a little bit more challenging to explain. And basically, what I've done is I've taken basically right here what NCCER is saying. I've also taken what the National Safety Council and what OSHA is saying. And my position is this. My position is that really our job is to be able to, that through training and education, right, and then of course leadership, that we can help employees and ourselves as well recognize hazards, evaluate the standards and the controls that may be necessary to implement, and then of course controlling the hazards, right, through engineering, administrative, and PPE controls, and that includes training, of course, in those components as well. So just the definition of safety. Also, our definition of risk, or the insurance definition of risk, right, which is basically measuring the probability and the consequences of all hazards, right? A lot of people you'll hear probability, severity, and frequency. You may hear that as well, okay? So probability, severity, and frequency, or probability and consequences being those two things, right? It could be severity and it could be the frequency as well. In addition, it's also a subjective evaluation, and just making sure that ultimately we want to be able to prevent injury, damage, or loss, right? Okay. Then there's your definition of a hazard. It could be a condition, could be a behavior, and basically what it's doing is that it could negatively impact our workforce, right? It could possibly cause an illness, injury, fatality, damage to property. It could cause any of those. The next two, folks, I'm not going to tell you that I totally agree. I think, and we've had this discussion a couple of times. As you see, the definition for NCCER for an accident is an unplanned and sometimes harmful or damaging event that's going to interrupt the normal progress, right, of a task, and it's going to basically invariably preceded by some type of unsafe act, condition, or a combination of them. Okay, and then an incident or a near miss. It's an undesired event. It's a little bit slighter circumstances, and it could have resulted in personal harm. So it's more of a near miss, is the way they're looking at it. I kind of tend to disagree, folks. I kind of tend to agree with more the oil and gas industry, where I see at least the parts of the safety world that I'm working in where an accident is more something that could have not been prevented. It could be an injury, illness, and it may even be a near miss or minor damage. And then an incident is something that totally could have been prevented. A perfect example of this is how you rarely ever see law enforcement or insurance companies now call in. Mostly everything is being called an incident, a crash, a wreck, an occurrence. And it seems like most organizations have really shied away from the word accident. Do y'all have an opinion on any of that? Is anybody using is anybody using the definition, or better yet, let me know, are you using the definitions in the way that NCCR states them, or are you using them more in kind of what I mentioned, where oil and gas, I tend to see, and insurance are using them more of what I said? Okay. Okay, conflicting. Okay, some don't know, right? Others, okay, yeah, you're right, and it's all just really. I think at this point, it's subjective, right? So yeah, well, a couple of you agreed with me, and that's great. I mean, it's not my opinion though. Like I said, it's I think it's those of us that are on the line that are more oil and gas, more refinery or chemical processing. I think kind of it's more what we're following. Okay, okay, cool. So let's go ahead and move on, right? Unsafe acts. What are we looking at? Unsafe acts are basically human behavior, right? Human behavior where employees are putting themselves at risk from either performing something or not performing something, and that they may possibly harm themselves. And then unsafe condition, what are we talking about? Basically a physical state, right? Where where possibly there could be a possible injury, illness, but it's more of a state than an action. But let me explain something here, folks. You often hear the term behavioral based safety, right? And I'm gonna take us into the internet for a second. Behavioral based safety, and let me use an example with us. Let's see. Let's say let's say we walk in and let's say a roof leak, right? Let's say for some reason I'm trying to give us a good example here, folks. Give me 1 second. Okay, so let's say for some reason, let's say this guy right here, right? Let's say that all of a sudden he walks in and he's the first person that walks in the morning. That room had rained the day before, the night before, and there was a roof leak that came in from flashing, right, or whatever the case is. But there was a roof leak. The roof is actually still has a few years of life on it. There's no reason why we should have anticipated a roof leak. Well, if this employee comes in here and this person slips and falls on this floor, it was probably a condition. Okay, yeah, although they needed to look, but it may have been a condition, right? However, let's say this person now, they go whatever, they go about their business to do something else. Let's say he's trying to go get a bucket, right, or clean up materials, but he doesn't put any barricading out, doesn't put any type of flagging out or anything. And all of a sudden, here comes employee B, and employee B slips and falls on that same leak. Well, the first one could have been a condition, but the second one is most likely going to be a behavior. Because if the first thing this person didn't do was stop, put everybody else on notice so nobody else could come walking through this area, well, and then it's probably going to be the second one. The first one would have probably been a conditional based hazard, and any subsequent ones after that would have probably been behavioral based. Does that make sense? Okay. Okay. So, and basically, let me kind of clarify it for you a little bit better, right? Is let's see. maybe a better, and maybe this is a better way to put it. Let's say this one right here, not a wet floor, right? Because a wet floor would have been behavioral based, but the easiest way to describe it is like this: is that a condition, a behavior, will probably always be a behavior, right? Let's say this employee walks into an area where signage was up that there was a wet floor and they still elected to come through or didn't pay attention to the sign, didn't notice it, whatever the case is, behavioral. Let's say the employee didn't put up a sign that was mopping, okay, again, behavioral, right? Neither one of those situations would have been conditional. But all of a sudden now, this was a leak that was found, and let's say that cone is not there and the leak was found, well, that would have been a conditional because it would have been the first employee coming through and they had no reason to believe that the floor was wet and slippery. However, now the sign's not there and the second employee comes through, right? Or the first one went to get cleanup materials or whatever. The second one is a behavior. So what happens is this, and this is the best way I can explain it. Behaviors will always pretty much stay behaviors. However, conditions, after they're realized, after the first one, and we fail to either take corrective action or fail to notify or fail to prevent others from coming through, well, the second ones and on will probably be more of a behavior as opposed to a condition. Okay, first one was a condition, usually after the first one, and then it'll probably turn into a behavior. Okay. Okay, great. So let's go ahead and keep on going then. Let's see. So that's unsafe behaviors and unsafe conditions, and then of course they talk a little bit about accidents as well. So let's talk about the three levels of accident causation. Let's talk about level 1, level 2, and level 3. And like I said, I'm not really crazy about the word accident. We can use incident, accident, but let's say for NCCR purposes, we're going to keep it at accident. Okay. And let's talk about the different levels. Level 1, it represents causes, right, of accidents. Okay, examples, you'll be accidents that are resulting from uncontrolled releases of energy, right? We might be talking about things where employees are injured, there's property damage, right? And where there may not be a whole lot, but they're still dangerous. Okay. So when we're investigating that accident, we have to make sure that we look closely at energy sources that might have been released unintentionally, right? Basically a lockout tagout failure or a failure to lockout tagout or a lockout tagout failure in most cases. Also, common examples, what it could be is uncontrolled releases like being struck by an object or equipment. It could be being caught between two objects, being struck by debris during the detonation of some type of explosive, being cut or scraped by a jagged edge. Those are some examples of them, right? And they could have been prevented, right? If the equipment was properly maintained or if it was properly locked out. Okay, level 2. It's going to go ahead and represent indirect causes of accidents. Indirect causes are factors that may have contributed to the accident, but weren't the main cause. Okay, a lot of times I'll wind up calling this multi-causation. Just depending, right? Depending how significant those causes were and how much input they had into the negative event that occurred. Um, Also, in the past, people have looked for only for indirect causes of accidents, right? Not the reasons behind the unsafe condition or act. And basically, it's kind of been rendered ineffective from time to time because indirect causes they're just a symptom of a greater problem, right? Okay, so let's talk about maybe some of the common unsafe acts that we find on a job site. Failing to properly use our PPE. Failing to warn coworkers of potential hazards, kind of like what I was talking about with that wet floor, right? Also, not following instructions or procedures, using defective equipment, using improper lifting techniques, taking an improper working position, possibly, or awkward working position, making safety devices inoperable, or jumping out safety devices. Also, operating equipment that at improper speeds. We may be operating it too fast normally. Operating equipment without authority. We're not authorized to maybe operate a forklift or operate, let's say, a powder actuated tool like a ramset gun, nail gun, or something like that. In addition to that, also servicing equipment while it's in motion or energized, basically failing to lock out and tag out equipment while we're servicing it, loading or placing equipment or supplies improperly or dangerously, using equipment improperly, working while we're impaired on some type of drug or alcohol, or also distracted, could be using our cell phone or some other type of equipment and being distracted, and then ultimately also engaging in horseplay, right? That's just several examples right there. And then unsafe conditions, right? What are we talking about? Unsafe conditions that are physical conditions that are different from acceptable or normal conditions, right? So few examples of unsafe conditions could be congested workplace. I mean, and that's a little hard one for me. Congested with employees, maybe if it's non preventable that all these employees are in the same area, maybe I'd say maybe like if we're congregating for a storm or a bunch of employees come into one area. If not, we should pretty much have traffic control and control over the population or where employees work. If it's tools, equipment, or materials, we definitely have control of that through housekeeping and through design. Also defective tools, equipment, or supplies. I'm not going to say as much defective equipment as I am going to say equipment that ultimately winds up either just, I guess, failing on its own due to wear and tear or whatever the case is, or exceeds its lifespan, and maybe we don't realize it. Also excessive noise, fire and explosion hazards, atmospheric gas hazards, right? Like, gases, dust, fumes, vapors. Also, inadequate support of guards, inadequate warning lines or warning systems, poor housekeeping, illumination, and poor ventilation. So some of those, like I said, they've got all those under conditional. I'm going to say a lot of those would also kind of been behavioral. So they become, because in my opinion, once we've like I said, once we discovered them the first time and we failed to do anything about them, warn, right, say, or develop different measures to either safely work around them or not work around them at all, that's when they actually convert from conditions over to behaviors, as far as I'm concerned. Okay. And then level 3, what to do, it represents like the root causes of accidents. It could be, it's ultimately the ultimate reason. It could be single or multiple reasons why we wound up having the problem in the first place. Okay. Like I said, I'm not big, and I think y'all have heard me say this over and over again. I'm not big on root cause analysis. I know it's important, and I do try to do it, but if you dig down deep enough in root cause analysis, we're often going to get one of a few answers. It's either going to be there was no policy in place, the policy wasn't followed, there wasn't a training program in place, or training wasn't adequately delivered, or it wasn't adequately followed. Other than that, anybody online right now that does any type of taproot investigation or single cause investigations out there? Okay. All right. Are any of you using the ones that are you using any type of like taproot or anything? Not taproot, but just root cause or multi causation or both? Yeah, me too. Both. Like I said, I like the techniques of a lot of root cause analysis programs. I definitely like the techniques. I just don't like to blame it on only one thing. And especially, like I said, if we drive down deep enough, the ones that I just mentioned will often be the ones that it winds up being. Okay. All right, great. So let's go ahead and move on. Let's talk a little bit about the cost of accidents. We talked about this in the little book, and then also in the field safety technology in the field safety book. So let's talk a little bit about accidents, right? And as we all know, they can definitely be very costly, right? It can wind up costing us. First of all, it can injure our employees, or it could injure the employer. It could also cause harm to the insurance company as well. And basically, they could wind up costing the insurance company or us a lot of money in either direct or indirect costs, right? So if you look at the next page, we'll look at the direct and indirect costs. And there's an example. It's called the iceberg effect for anybody who's not familiar with it. It basically means that when we first get in an accident, or if we even are contemplating an employee wind up being injured in the workplace or property damage, we often only see that very little part at the top of what is potential, and we don't realize how many underlying issues, concerns, cost that may also affect our business as well. Okay, so it's called the iceberg effect, and as you see at the top, a lot of times the things that we see are originally right, the direct cost. What are we talking about? We're talking about medical bills, employee compensation, benefits. That's really the direct costs that we're seeing. Indirect costs, we're seeing things like property damage, equipment damage, production delays, supervisor's time, right, to work this injury, illness, or fatality, or property damage. Also, the time that it takes to retrain employees, and then of course, image or morale as well. The image it pertains to the public, and then morale that it also affects the rest of our workers, right, the rest of our workforce as well. Okay, so let's talk about accident experience versus future insurance costs, right? We're talking a little bit about our EMR. For those of you online tonight, who's familiar with their EMR, with the experience modification rate? Okay. Okay, well, let me go ahead and walk us through it, okay? So these are things, right? So let's say a contractor, when our insurance company rates us, and let's say insurance company, normally it's our workers' comp, right? What happens is that, and then also it could be our general liability from time to time as well. They rate us on, our accident experience, right? And it's going to wind up having a significant effect on our future insurance costs as well. So basically, if we have a poor experience, we're generally going to pay more for insurance, right? Because we're at greater risk. So the difference in our workers' compensation and our EMR or experience modification rate, which is what's often going to drive that price. And we're going to show you a calculation in just a minute. And I've got one that I actually did with another class in here, so we'll talk about that one as well. So let's say that experience modification rating is a method, right, of modifying future workers' comp costs, insurance premiums, okay? And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be comparing some different examples. I'm going to show you the one in the book, and then I'm going to show you one on my computer as well. So the average rate of a particular class, right? Different classes have different rates. I'm going to show you that on the next page for carpenters, electricians, pipe fitters, and iron workers. And then basically, a 1.0 is like 100%. Anything less than a 1.0 is going to be a credit in our favor. Anything higher than a 1.0 is actually going to cost us more insurance, okay, on our EMR. So if you look at your right-hand page, and let me give you an example. Let's say, look at the right-hand page, and let's say you look at carpenters, and you see the workers' comp rate. It's basically 37 cents for every dollar paid, okay? Or $37 for every $100 paid. So let's say, let me get my calculator, folks. Give me 1 second, okay? So let's say we wind up paying, I'll give you an example. We wind up paying, like you see there, $120,000 in payroll, right? We're going to do $120,000 in payroll times 0.3716. It's $44,592, as you see there, in insurance costs. That's what our workers' comp is costing us, okay? And then you see electricians at a rate of 11.8. Pipe fitters are 9.24, almost 9.25. And then iron workers are 44% because they're such high risk, okay? And if you look, these examples, many of these examples are used from Louisiana numbers, folks. I see many of you on from Louisiana tonight. And of course, we know our insurance rates, right, tend to be higher than most, right? Especially in the southern part of the state. Okay, so let me give you an example here. Let's say, if you see there, you notice there that the total insurance cost, do you see how the total insurance cost is $89,505.20? Okay, our total payroll, right, was $315,000, but yet our workers' comp is almost $90,000. So basically, what are we talking about? We're talking about our average workers' comp on this policy is going to be very high. It's going to be about 28%. Now, they're not including any administrative, any welders. Admin and welders is probably about 3 to 4% as opposed to that high. And where you see here, the lowest one is pipe fitters, which is 9%, right? So let me give you an example, folks. Let me show you how this EMR works, right? This experience modification rate. Basically, a 1.0 equals 100%. Let me go ahead and pull this this file that we were using today. Okay, so let's do it from here. Okay, let me get this down to 300 or 250. Okay, so let's go from here, and let's say that my workers' comp here, right here, is going to be 100% is going to be 89,505.20. Okay, so let me see. Give me 1 second, folks. Let's see. B8 times C8, so... Oh, sorry. I had it in the wrong column. I was wondering why it didn't change. Okay, so let's say here, right? 89,505.20. Let's see. Okay. Let me do this. Let me go with the 150. Let me go back with what I had, and I'm going to give you an example. Let's say that this rate. You see where it says 89,000, almost $90,000, right? Okay. So let's say that $90,000. Hang on 1 second, folks. Let me try this one more time. Maybe I might have been in the wrong column. Okay, there we go. So 89,505. Let's see. Let me copy this number over. Okay, so this will pretty much give you an idea. Okay, is this what I want you to do, folks? I want you. This is our insurance cost at 100%. Okay, that's 100% cost right here. Let me just spread this out a little bit more for us. Let's see, at 100%, at a 1.0. Which you'll also notice the 1.0 is right here. Okay, this is 1.0 right here. Okay, all right. So if you notice, that's where the NCCR book, that's where the textbook has us, right? Okay, so if our EMR is a 1.0, can anybody tell me, do you know your EMR out there, folks? If you know your EMR, can you give me what your rate is? You should probably be under a 1, I would imagine most of your companies. You might be between a 0.80 and a 0.95 or something. Maybe even a 0.7s. Anybody familiar with theirs? Okay. All right. So we got a couple of them, right? And okay, yeah, 1.0. 1.0 is average. So let me show you, right? So with this particular company, right? With this particular company, this is based on $315,000 of payroll, right? At that average of 28%, because we added up, remember, folks, we added up, I basically took 89,505, right? Divided up by 315,000, which is the total payroll, comes out with 28.4%. That's basically what we're paying across the board because of the different of carpenters, electricians, pipe fitters, and iron workers. If you have administrative people in there, if you have plumbers in there, that rate's going to drive down a little bit, okay? And these are also, I'll be honest with you, with these numbers being so high, it's probably something like LWCC or something like that, Louisiana Workers' Compensation Corporation. I think that's what LCC stands for. So so that's probably, or companies, that's going to be probably the higher rated one, okay? It's almost like the insurance of last resort for the state. So if we're paying, let's say if you have a 1.0, right? A couple of you said you think you have a 1.0. That means that your insurance premium would be an 89,505 on $315,000 of payroll, okay, which is here. This is zero. So for anybody else, they would do it, and let me change this. Let me change this to an actual color. Let me change it to green. That way you'll understand. For anybody else, this is what happens. If we can improve that EMR, right? If we can improve that EMR and start dropping it, let's say we drop that EMR by all the way down to a 0.88, which is very reasonable, by implementing a good safety plan, minimizing injuries and illnesses for 2 to 3 years, maybe having a better healthy safety training program as well, and working with our insurance company to either lower that EMR or to get discount points. If you can get that EMR down to a 0.88, you're basically paying for that same insurance, the same level insurance, we'd be paying $78,764. Okay, I'll give you an example. Big companies like, let's say, Chevron, EMR, KBR, bigger servicing companies, most of those are probably in the 0.65 to 0.75 range. And look at the price for the same insurance, right? The same workers' comp, the same amount of employees that you would have or I would have and they would have. They're going to be probably somewhere between that premium for them, if they're not self-insured, is going to be somewhere between $58,000 and $67,000. If their EMOD is between a 0.6 right here, between a 0.65 and a 0.75. Okay. If you're at a 1.0, this is what you're paying. You're paying even money. So we're taking this 89,505 right here and multiplying it by 1. That's how we get 89,505. And then if your EMR is a 0.88, if your premium is supposed to be 89,505, you're going to multiply it times 0.88 because you're only paying 88% of that 100 premium because of the safety record. So your premium is going down by almost $11,000. Okay. And then the same thing going down by almost another $11,000 to get down to 0.75. And again, about another $9,000 to get down to 0.65. Okay. But look what happens if you go the other way. Let's say you're at a 1.0 and you take one injury, and all of a sudden you go to a 1.1, right? Kind of like they were showing us in the book right here. You're at 98,455. Or worse, you take two injuries or one big significant injury, you're at $111,000. So you're talking about having to pay another $10,000 or $20,000 on workers' comp just in order to stay insured. Do you see how that works? Okay, yeah, so you take that premium, right, and then you put that multiplier on it. If you're at a 1.0, you just multiply times 1.0. Anything less than a 1.0, you multiply by point whatever it is. And if you're at a 1 point something, you just multiply times 1 point whatever it is. And that's what's going to give to you. But let me show you what the killer is, right, folks? Let's say you're at a 1.0, and let's say you're at a 1.0. Let's say that I'm at a 1.1. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm at a 1.25. If I'm at a 1.25, it's costing me another 22,376 in insurance than it's costing you. Okay, so I'm going to show you something really quickly here. Okay, let's call this 22,376, right? Okay, now this is what I'm doing. This is my insurance increase, right? All right, folks, do me a favor. Tell me, what's an average profit margin in your company? You're trying to stay at about 15% on construction? You're probably shooting for 17 to 20, but you're probably getting closer to 14 or 15. Is that for the profit margin for the company? Do you think that's fair for anybody who knows your profit margin? Okay, so let's say let me show you what I'm going to do now, right? So let's say profit margin, right? And hang with me. This is going to take a second to get us there, okay? Let me make this smaller. That's going to be part of my problem right here. Let's see. Okay, profit margin, right? And we're going to be at 15%, right? Okay. All right. So for our profit margin, if we want to make up this $22,000 that we're leaving on the table, this is what you're going to do. You're going to take that profit margin, right? So we're going to take 22,376, and then what you're going to do is this. You're going to divide that. You're going to divide that by 15. We're going to take that and we're going to divide it by 15. All right, so I'm actually going to multiply. It's going to be easier. So this is what I'm going to do is I'm equals, and I'm going to do D20. I'm doing my, just so you know what I'm doing. Or let's just do this. 22,375 divided by 15. Okay, is 1441. That's 1%. And all I'm doing is I'm taking that number, and now and for anybody who doesn't know what I'm doing, I'm just taking that 1491 now, and I'm multiplying it by 100%. Okay, so I'm dividing by 15 because we have 15% profit margin. I hope I'm not messing anybody up here. And then what I'm doing is I'm actually multiplying that 1% by 100% to get to the full total of the company again. So basically, let's see. Let me do this a different way. I know what happened. I shouldn't have that G in there. Okay. So let's see. Let me get rid of that. Okay, so this is our profit margin, right? This is 1%, and then all we did was multiply that by 100%. So if our profit margin is 100%, I'm sorry, if our profit margin is 15%, so stick with me, right? We need to make up. Let me fix this really quickly. Okay, we need to make up 22,735. Are you with me so far? If we're at 1.25, right? We need to make up $27,000 to get back to even. Okay. Okay. In order to do that, and we want a 15% profit margin for our company. In order to make 15% profit, I'm dividing by 15. I got down to 1%, and I'm multiplying up to 100 just to get there. We need to do 1.1. No, that's not right. Hang on. Give me 1 second, folks. 22,375 divided by 15% times 100. Okay, it's 149. For some reason, I'm carrying an extra zero, and I don't know why. Let me see. Oh, I'm sorry. 1491. Let me get this over again. For some reason, that formula didn't work. 14. I think I put too many numbers in there. 1491. Sorry about that. Times 100. Okay. Okay, there we go. Sorry about that. I don't know what I did. I think I put an extra number in there. So we need to make an extra. We need to sell another $149,000 of services. All right. Just to break even that 15%. So if we lose $22,350 in workers' comp, we got to do another $150,000 in business just to net that 15%. Does that make sense? I know it kind of took us a long way to get there. This is why the big companies are getting bigger, and this is why the small companies are getting smaller. Okay, and we're trying to come up with a formula, folks. We're as you notice, we're building all this in Excel right now just to try to make it work. Okay, but let me show you where the biggest risk is. Okay, so we have to do another $150,000 in business, right, to make up that 22,375 at a 15% profit margin, right? But let me tell you where the biggest risk. It's not just $150,000, because correct me if I'm wrong. If we have a higher EMR, we're probably going to qualify for lower bid jobs, right? Do you agree with that? Okay. Okay. And if we have a higher EMR, our insurance is going to cost us more, right? So we're actually going to do more work for the same 150, right? But let's say we're doing that 100 or the type of contracts we're going to have. But this is where the greatest risk kicks in, right? So catch this. That's if we're competing with a 1.0 EMR company. What if the other company's at a 0.88 or 0.75, right? Now, this is where it becomes tricky. That $150,000, and y'all tell me what you think. I would say that labor cost is somewhere around 60 to 65%. Let's say 65%, and material cost and equipment cost is probably right around 35% on a $150,000 job. Would you agree with that on a construction job? Would you say that your labor? Okay, so just ballpark, right? Because it's always different. So check this out. Let's say, so now let's do this, right? Now we're looking at labor. Let's do material first. Material first. Material, let's say 35%, right? Times 150,000 is about 52,500. We did this today, and it's shocking when you start looking at this, okay? And material, and then so we're going to say, and then labor minus 150,000 is about 97,500, okay? And labor, okay? Okay, so, and let's talk about one thing. So let's look at this labor, folks, right here, okay? Let's call it $100,000, right? Just to keep it a round number. What would you say your average payroll is? I would say low end is 12 to 15. Your high end is probably 32 to 42. Is that a fair assessment? You're probably averaging about $20 an hour per employee if you take your high number, your low number. So if you agree with that, put a 20 in, because all I'm starting to see is a bunch of yeses and nos. So put a 20 in if you okay. So you agree with 20, right? Okay, I got a couple of them that say 18. Okay, so let's call it 20. So if you take $97,000 in labor, right? And now we're going to divide that by 20, right? Now we're going to take that, we're going to divide it by 20. I'm just putting that in just so we don't lose track. And I'm just doing the manual by $20 an hour, okay? And I'm just doing it here because I don't want to try to figure out the formula right now. So folks, so check this out: $97,000, right? 97,500 divided by $20 per hour. That means we're going to have to work an extra 475 man hours, okay? Hours in order to make up that money. That's how many hours you have to work to make up $97,500 at an average of $20 an hour. So let me ask you a question. What do you think the risks are? Don't you think we're taking it even a bigger risk now that, forget the dollars. We're having to work another almost 5,000 hours just to make up the money. And we're taking the risk of taking another injury, illness, fatality, or recordable on that 5,000 hours. Do you see how it's a bad trap when you get a higher EMR? That's where that investment comes in. Okay. All right. Well, I see we may have to do a refresher on this, and it looks like most of y'all kept up, but I apologize if it got a little crazy. I'm going to work this formula up in order to make something work a little bit better. Okay. So is it okay? Are you somewhat understandable? Do y'all need me to clarify this a little bit, or are you okay for right now until we draft it maybe in a more clear document? Okay. I mean, that's a lot. That's a lot of hours. Don't you agree? That's at an average of 2,000 hours per full-time employee. That's 2.5 employees we have to hire just to make up that money. Okay. That's why it's crucial that we get that EMR down. Okay. Okay. So let's move on. Okay. Okay. So sorry about that. I know that took a while, but I mean, when we start dealing with money, right, we know it gets a little bit more complicated. So okay. So let's go ahead and move on, and let's move to the next page now. And then you have construction users roundtable, right? Basically, it's reporting that's estimating the cost of maintaining an effective safety program. They're looking at it and saying basically it's about 2.5% of the direct labor cost. Okay. So again, right, let's say we said our labor cost was $315,000 in that one situation. 315,000 times 2.5%. Many companies, I'm telling you, are somewhere around 3%. So that way, if we're at $315,000 on that labor cost times 0.025, we're looking at about almost $8,000 per year. Okay, on that. If you're looking at $1 million, basically, if you're looking at $1 million, you're looking at about $25,000 in safety cost. Okay, I can tell you this: the insurance companies, folks, most of them for their risk departments. Most of them are putting about 3% or close to it, right? About 3% towards risk management and about 3% towards education and training and services on top of that. Okay, so just to give you an idea, so our numbers are really, that 0.25 that NCCER is saying is really close to the insurance industry number as well. Okay, all right. So we'll get some more stuff to you also on the construction users roundtable as well. And then, but there you go. There's pretty much the number that we're talking about. And like I said, we'll kind of put that into that same formula and kind of note it a little bit on there as well. Okay. So let's talk about the basic components of a safety program. What are we talking about? First of all, tell me if you already have a safety plan. Tell me if you have a safety plan. Tell me well, let me rephrase it. Hopefully you have one. So tell me you have one. If you do. And if you have one, tell me if you're currently working on it, or well, let me rephrase it. If you're working on it or plan on working on it, or if it's fine as is. Okay. All right. So yeah, a couple of you working on it. One, you think it's okay as is. Okay. Okay. Yeah, and that's what happens, right? Is that chances are, most of you are working on it, right? And remember this, folks. There's nothing wrong with it. Even if you're not working on it currently, just make sure you go back to it. It's a living document, right? But I will tell you this, and this is just from experience that we have here, is try to make it easier instead of harder. I think one of those things that we do is we keep on adding. Rather than adding, maybe we need to simplify and start to eliminate. Unless we get to a client that really wants a lot of writing, right? I've seen some clients in the past that, or some organizations in the past that kind of judge us by the number of pages, and it's not by the number of pages; it's by the quality of writing. Okay. Okay, so things that it has to include, right, is management support, in a policy statement, right? Basically what our safety mission and safety statement is. We also have to have a drug and alcohol policy, safety rules, whatever the organization's safety rules are, what our goals are and how we're going to get to orientation and training, access to first aid and follow-up medical care as well, pre-project or pre-task safety planning. Also, it's going to identify type of safety meetings we're going to have, how we're going to plan on getting or how we're going to have employees involved. Also, subcontractor management, if you have subcontractors. Of course, we're going to have our emergency action plan and how we're going to deal with the media, inspections, employee observations, and audit processes as well, accident investigation analysis, record keeping, and then program evaluations and follow-ups. Okay, so at a minimum, that's the kind of information that we're going to need in it. And then in order to comply with government standards like OSHA and MSHA as well, we may be adding some additional items to it, HAZCOM, bloodborne pathogens, welding processes, right, burning, cutting, respiratory protection programs, testing, also PPE, working maybe competent persons and training for elevator work surfaces like fall protection from ladders, aerial lifts, scaffolding, okay, PPE, work practices and training. And then also hearing conservation programs and hearing protection programs if necessary, confined space entry, lockout, tagout, crane, hoist, and other lifting devices as well, maybe come-alongs or items like that, mobile crane operations, also any type of trenching and excavation operations as well, right? So if we work around radiation, if you do any type of pipe welding, pipe joining, right, we may have radiation, we may have some machine guarding in there if you're using something like that rigid pipe 535 pipe thread that I showed you last week, okay, so anything like that as well. We also have to have that management support. So we want to have that statement in there from the organization or organization, either leader or leaders, about what the organization's commitment to safety is, right? Also, our policy in alcohol and drug abuse. We want to make sure that we address all the issues like increased workers' compensation and health costs, decrease in productivity, increased tools and material costs, also absenteeism. So items that we're trying to, a lot of times that's how, or when I work on a safety policy, is I'll use those statements kind of like we're implementing the drug and alcohol program to help minimize or reduce the risk of all of these and all of the following that I just mentioned, okay? We also want to make sure that we have our safety rules in there, right? What rules are the employers going to have to follow? What general rules? What specific rules? Are there any sites that we have to address specifically on top of that, okay? Any type of craft training, specialty training, safety rules that might apply as well. Also, orientation and safety training. What is our process when we hire new employees, right? Do we have an existing employee that's assigned to a new job? If do we have to, or we're going to cross train them? Do they have to be trained up? What about any new jobs that are started? Do we need to make sure, especially if we're going into some type of new plant or refinery, is there any additional training in that has to be accomplished that the client is requiring of us? Okay. And most of this, you don't have to put it on your safety plan, but at least have some type of addendum, and this can also go back to site specific training, right? And that's you can use basically put an addendum or an ancillary document in order to cover that, right? Also, in order for safety training to be effective, what are we going to cover? The correct work procedures, how to care, use, and maintain our PPE, and what the limitations are, the hazards and safeguards of associated with any type of harmful materials, any substances like biological hazards, chemical hazards, radiation hazards. Also, where to go for help. Who do we contact? Most recently, we had two employers, and they wanted us to actually put the name, but one of the companies had a decent bit of turnover. So we told them, rather than put the name, we want to put the position. So basically contact whoever the health and safety coordinator is, right? But also what the company did is that they listed the health and safety coordinator on the management list, and they also put it on the internet. So that way, whoever is reading their document, their health and safety program, if they want to know who it is, they can go to the website, or they can go within the office, the intranet in the office, and the signage, and also know who the safety coordinator is as well. Also knowing what our site emergency reporting and response procedures are as well, as far as any emergency action plans. And then we also want to make sure that we have safety meetings, right? We want to make sure that we have employee involvement. So items that we want to do that we want to be able to do is exchange information, right, regarding specific safety matters. So a lot of times when we have safety meetings, one of the main things we should address is any hazards or concerns that we addressed in the last meeting. Also, one of the next things should be, have we observed any new hazards? Have we had any new encounters or close calls or near misses, right? Also, providing a written record of any actions taken, right? What was the correction action taken? What was the correction taken? Was there correction done? Was the corrective action made? Also, establish an effective communication link between management and employees. What's really good for that is workshops, roundtables, where employees can feel that they can speak without feeling like they're going to be retaliated against. It could be possible that middle management, upper management may discover that a supervisor or a manager may not follow protocols, but it doesn't mean that you come out of the roundtable meeting and immediately address it unless it's imminent danger. Perhaps we need to investigate. Perhaps we need to do more audits and assessments to make sure that we're observing it as well, and it doesn't always fall on the employees going to roundtables. Also, focus on the hazards and safeguards that are associated with any planned task. So these are all items in safety meetings, right, and employee involvement that we absolutely want to make sure that we're meeting. In addition to that, and then folks, this is what we're going to do. Just so you know, I'm going to run this all the way through right now, all the way through 5.11. Okay, and then we'll go ahead and break out in just a few minutes. Okay. Also in emergency action plans, right? Methods for dealing with the media. First of all, remember, every employee has the right to free speech. If they have an opinion, they have a right to voice their opinion, and we can't stop that. And we shouldn't try to stifle that. However, employees should not be talking company business if they're not the person authorized to talk to the media. Okay, they shouldn't be putting items on social media if they are deemed to be factual, because they may not actually have the accurate facts. Okay, so just remember that, right? There's a difference between opinion and there's a difference between fact. Okay. Also, inspections, employee observations, and audits. Do you have your own employees doing any type of behavioral-based safety reports, right, or conditional-based safety reports or audits? If not, perhaps think about training employees how to do audits themselves. Okay. It doesn't mean you have to show them how to do a full audit. Maybe you'll develop an audit card. Do something small first, like doing their own safety inspections over their PPE, ladder inspections, scaffold inspections. Okay, so just keep it small, measurable, and attainable at first, and then let the program grow from within. I'm sure the leaders will start to emerge, and then you'll know who you can depend on more than anything else. Maybe invest a little bit more time and money and invest in training those employees. Also, we want to do things like safety inspections. We want to use them to detect unsafe conditions and unsafe behaviors, right? Like I said, safety observation cards or safety observation reports, where they're performed in order to help detect those unsafe work practices and procedures in the workplace as well. Many times it's the employees. And it's not that we want you to drop it down on each other, it's that we want to take the corrective action before somebody gets significantly hurt, right? Also, safety audits as well. Make sure we monitor the audits. And then basically, supervisors also, they're going to be expected to fill out and complete the same reports, right? And maybe on a more frequent basis. We may look at safety personnel one a week or a few a week. We may look at field employees and want one a month or a few a quarter. Okay. Many organizations that I've been in have taken workers that are non-safety related and give them three a quarter. Some have done more. Also, the accident investigation analysis, right, or incident investigation analysis. We want to be able to conduct non-biased reports, take the information, gather the information so that afterwards we can start determining items like, causes of the accident, right? Was it a single cause? Was it multi-causation? Hopefully help to prevent it from reoccurring. That's the main, remember this, folks, right? The main purpose for conducting an accident investigation, it's not to find fault. It's not to find blame. It's to be able to hopefully prevent it in the future and keep it from happening again. Okay. Also, satisfying insurance companies a lot of times, right? Or regulatory agencies, because we did our investigation. documenting the facts, preserving any evidence that we have for any type of legal purposes, actions, lawsuits that may come. Also detecting trends or identifying potential problems in place. If we continue having, let's say, 2 or 3 back pulls, right, they have to do with compressed gas cylinders. Why is that? Do they need a better dolly? Do they need a better lifting mechanism? So start tracking and trending, right? Eye injuries, hand injuries, near misses, close calls, recordables, all of it, okay? And then, of course, maintaining adequate records, right? And maintaining adequate records, we're going to do that a few ways. We're going to maintain our OSHA 300 log as required by OSHA. We're going to maintain our annual summary off of that log, and then any incident reports and near misses, okay? So at a minimum, we're going to be maintaining all that information, plus any other internal or client-driven documents that we need to maintain as well, okay? And then we want to do evaluations and follow-ups. We don't want to just take the information. We want to follow up, see if corrective actions have been taken. See, maybe go do more observations and see how those groups and other groups are working within their own groups now, and see if corrective actions or better practices are being followed. Okay, and then also, this is called the 9 best industry practices, right? And this basically comes, it's a recent study from the Construction Industry Institute and a committee, and basically they're talking about target zero, right? Goals of zero incidents. And what are we talking about? We're talking about practices that can have the best impact on safety. Things like everyone's demonstrated management commitment, right? So the company being committed to the safety of the organization. Also, staffing for safety, having enough personnel that are going to be in the safety department or safety capacity. It could be on the operations and production side, but that maybe we start gearing them up with more responsibilities towards safety. Also, planning, right? Safety planning for pre-project, pre-task, so that when we get to the task, we already have the majority of the work out of the way already, and then now we're just tweaking and evolving. Also, safety training and education, worker involvement and participation, recognitions and awards, also subcontractor management, accident and incident reporting and investigations, and then ultimately drug and alcohol testing. So there right there are the main components, okay, of those best practices. And then just remembering, right, that as a safety technician, we have to always be aware of industry best practices as much as possible. That way we can help integrate some of these practices into our workplace. Okay. So let's do this, folks. We're going to stop right there. It's regulatory requirements. So what we'll do is when we come back from the break, we'll pick up there at 1.9. And my goal, and there's no reason why we shouldn't hit it tonight, is we will wrap up at 1.14. Okay, tonight. So let's do this. Let's go ahead and take. Let me see what time it is right now. I got 7:35 right now. Let's take 15 minutes, folks. We'll jump back on at 10 minutes till. Okay, we'll take 15 minutes. We'll take it on 10 minutes till, and we should be wrapping up right around 8:45 tonight. Okay. So look at all the other stuff that we did. If you have any questions when we come back on, feel free to just text them in the chat box, and then we'll go ahead and address them as well. Okay. So I'll see you guys in 15 minutes. Thank you. Okay. All right, everybody. So we are back. All right. Can you guys just check in? Just let me know if you guys are out there. Okay, good. Looks like we got a couple of them. Okay. Looks like most of y'all are back on. Okay, good. All right, so let's go ahead and keep rolling. Okay, folks. We're at section 6.0 now. So we're going to talk a little bit about regulatory requirements. And obviously, as y'all know, the majority of it is going to wind up being OSHA probably, right? So different agencies. So different agencies that we need to work with during regulatory at a minimum. We're going to be working with OSHA for our safety. We're going to be working maybe with MSHA if we have any type of mining or underground operations going on. The EPA, the DOT, may also be NIOSH. Can you tell me out there, folks? Let me know who you're working with. Obviously, or what regulations or what standards you're working with. Obviously, I think most of you are working with OSHA, but let me know what other agencies you may have responsibilities to. Yep. Okay, good. Yeah, OSHA, DOT. Okay. I'm sure one of you. Okay, good. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and keep it going, okay? So, obviously as we know, as most of us know, OSHA, we also know it was enacted in 1970, right? President Nixon signed it into law December 1970. We also know that basically what the OSHA Act did, the OSHA Act went ahead and basically it authorizes enforcement, right, of the standards that are developed under the OSHA Act. Now, look, I want to point out OSHA established three things, right? And let me just go to the internet for this; it'll be easier. OSHA established three things, folks. One of the main things it established, obviously, is the Office of OSHA, put it underneath the U.S. Department of Labor's office, right? So it established OSHA, put it underneath the U.S. Department of Labor, all right, and also to establish NIOSH, which is National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health. It's under the CDC or the Center for Disease Control, right? Department of Health and Human Services. So it established the OSHA Act established NIOSH. They're responsible for our health. OSHA is responsible for our safety as employees. And then also it established that both of those and other stakeholders would have committees at least twice a year to go ahead and discuss safe practices, trends, necessary practices, regulations, and all that. Okay, so those are the three primary things that the OSHA Act established. Okay, um, also, we know it's used to assist and encourage states, right, in their own efforts. There's roughly 25 states right now that have a state plan, three that only have a plan for their state of public employees, municipal employees. All the private employees still fall under the federal program. And then, of course, the federal program as well. So let me just show you a map of it really quickly. Okay, so basically, these all these states that I've got listed right there. Let's see, all these states that we've got listed right there. Basically, those are all the states that have a they're going to wind up having their own state program. Okay, they're going to wind up having their own state program. Let me see if I can pull up the map for us real quickly. And here you go. Here's a perfect example, folks. Okay, so excuse me one second. Let's see. Okay, so any state that you see in dark blue, this is the one I'm looking for right here, the green map. This is perfect. So anything that you see in this map here that's in dark green means it's under the federal program. Anything that you see is in light green has their own state program. And then the three states you see here, New Hampshire, New York, and what was it? Illinois, I think. I can't remember. I thought it was Illinois, but I wasn't sure. Um, will end up having their own. They have a sector just for government employees. Okay, everyone else, all the public, is still governed by the private companies are still governed by the federal program. Okay, so it's all of these states, and then Puerto Rico also, as you see here, Puerto Rico has its own state plan as well. It's obviously we know it's a U.S. territory, but it has its own state plan as well. Okay, so there you go. Just to let you know what basically with the state plans receive about 90% of what OSHA would have spent in their state anyway. So they get about 90% to run their own program, and then they also keep the any fines and penalties that are generated in their state as well. Okay, so just to let you know. Okay, so let me go ahead and go back now. So that's OSHA we're looking at. One second, please. Okay. Um, so those are state programs that we are just talking about, and then also things that it does is it provides research, information, education, right, and training for health and safety. I think I've done this before, but let me do it again. Let me go back to the OSHA website right now, folks. Let's see. I'm losing my menu, so give me 1 second. I'm trying to put my menu back on the screen right now. Okay. Okay. There we go. All right. So let me go back to OSHA's website, right? OSHA.gov for anybody who's not familiar. Okay, now we're going to go to English. Okay, and then let me show you something for anybody who's not familiar. Let's see. I have no idea how I got into, I don't even know what that is, German or something. Let's see. Let me try it one more time. Okay, there we go. Okay, so now I'm back at the OSHA website. Now what I'm going to do is this. You see right here, folks, where it says A to Z index? Let me bring you there. And then I'm going to press P right here for publications, okay? Anybody who hasn't done this yet, this is the OSHA Quick Takes right here for the newsletter. I would definitely recommend putting your email in there to sign up for the newsletter, and then you'll get an email to confirm it. And basically, you'll get the free twice-a-month newsletter. It's pretty good. It talks about a lot of fines and penalties, what's trending in our areas, and then new coming events as well, okay? Okay, so I'm going here to the P right here on this menu. For publications, it's going to be the third, the bottom one right here. A lot of times, do any of you out there use fact sheets or quick cards right now? Let me show you an example. They're the best ones to use. Let's say like this aerial lift quick card right here. Let me show you. This is the HTML. I'm not crazy about the HTML. It really prints really poorly. As you can see there, you can see my print menu. It prints kind of crazy and it's small print, okay? You know, the best thing to do is this, is come back and do the PDF whenever you do it. Where is it again? Let's see, aerial lifts right here. So quick card, and look what it looks like. And now when it prints, and now you have a nice clean card like that, that'll wind up printing for you, okay? So so you have quick cards and fact sheets. You have different publications, but anytime you see the words quick card or fact sheet like this, that means that they're going to be smaller, much smaller publications. Okay, so perfect example is this one right here. Let's see, it's only 2 pages long, and that's it. Okay, great topics, great for tailgate safety meetings, great for weekly safety meetings, folks. Okay, and then if you're an outreach trainer for construction or general industry, definitely good as well. Okay, actually definitely closed out. Let me go back in again. Okay, so let me just show you where that is again. So I'm doing English. I'll keep on wanting to do English. I don't know. Okay, English menu this time, and I'm gonna do A to Z index right here. I'm going to P. Okay, and publications, right? And there you go. That's where I was right now. Okay, now you can also do this as well if you'd like. You can go right here where it says training. Let me do it a different way. Let me go right here to find, and I'm going to type in the word grants, GRANTS. And I'm looking for this first one right here, Harwood grants. Susan Harwood used to be a director, administrator with OSHA. She was really in charge of a lot of healths, like confined space, silica standard, H2S, and she was a really influential part in a lot of the healths. Okay, after she passed away, they actually wound up naming the grant after her. If you come here, folks, come down here where it says my topic. And there you go. Okay, so now you'll be able to see different topics here, okay, that you may want to pick up training material for. All right, it'll tell you what by language. Excuse me, I did by language. Let me do by topic. There you go, by topic. There you go, different types of combustible dust, crane safety, disaster response, electrical hazards, okay, ergonomics, and the list goes on and all. Falls, focus 4, you name it, okay? So all different types of hazard recognition there, and PowerPoints. Let me open one for you really quick. You'll see what I'm talking about. And this one, as you see here, this one's got 4 PowerPoints in it, okay? You'll open some other ones. They'll have PowerPoints. It'll have this one right here. Look at it. It's got PowerPoints in it, PDFs like fact sheets and different quick cards. And then you'll also have it in Spanish on some of them as well. Okay. Different languages, but obviously the majority of them are going to be in Spanish. Okay. All right, great. Well, now you know where to find a bunch of resources if you didn't know already. And then also remember, right, like as a safety technician, that we're going to be required to follow OSHA standards, and different government standards as well, right? So the CFRs, basically the standards, any policies. We'll also be pulling statistics and data from time to time. maybe referencing documents, forms, or any type of training resources as well. Okay, so just keep all that in mind as well. Okay, okay, and then let me go ahead and keep on moving on. And then you have MSHA. Anybody? I don't think there's anybody on with MSHA tonight. Let me see. I thought I might have seen one person, but let me pull it up just in case. Let's see. Okay, here you go. Mine Safety and Health Administration. It is also part, remember, it is also part of the OSHA standards as well. I mean, I'm not OSHA, excuse me, Department of Labor. And there you go. This is, it looks more relatively like the OSHA page, right? So this one's more driven towards mine, as you see, mining, metal, non-metal, coal, okay? So different hazards as well, okay? So that's there for you as well. And then also, in addition to that, obviously OSHA and MSHA both can do inspections. They can wind up doing the MSHA can wind up doing withdrawal orders as well, minor training for minors, whereas OSHA will wind up being more employees, right? Oil and gas, construction, manufacturing, retail, healthcare, construction, you name it, right? Okay, and then let's talk about inspections. This is what happens, right? As far as inspections, as with OSHA, for anybody who's not familiar, there'll be 4 steps in any OSHA inspection when it comes to OSHA. And basically, OSHA is going to go through 4 inspections. Let me see if I can pull it up for you. And I'll tell you, it's the first one they're going to do is they're going to present credentials, okay? I just want to see if I can pull up the image for you or the map for it real quick. Let's see, OSHA inspections, here we go. Okay, so the first thing OSHA is going to do, and this is why they're going to inspect right here. They're often going to inspect from imminent danger, also like severe injuries or illnesses or fatalities. They may come in as well. Okay, they may come in due to worker complaints or referrals from other federal agencies, state agencies, or other companies. Okay, maybe media coverage where they see something that's not appropriate. Okay, maybe target inspections by industry, by high hazard industries, maybe geographical regions. Okay, and then also follow up inspections as well. Okay, so those are all different types of reasons why they would come out. And then what's going to happen is they're going to come for these steps right here. First of all, they're gonna prepare, right? Obviously, before they come out, they're gonna, or in most cases, they'd be preparing before they come out to know who they're coming out to, see if they've been here to our facility before, see if we've had any previous citation inspections or citations or penalties. And then also, when they come out, the first thing they're going to do is present their credentials. So present their credentials. We should go ahead and actually call. I recommend calling 1-800-321-OSHA. You know, I tell people never call the number on an identification card just in case it's false. I would definitely recommend contacting OSHA at the 1-800-321-OSHA number just to verify that that you have somebody there that, in fact, worked with the federal government. Okay. Then the next step would be an opening conference. The second step, the third step would be a walk around or an inspection. And the fourth step is going to be a closing conference, okay? So let me go through them again, folks. We're going to start here for first step. So they're going to prepare, but the 4 steps to the visit is going to be they present credentials is step 1. They open a conference, step 2. They walk around or inspect, step 3. And the fourth step is they wind up doing a closing conference. And then later, they have up to 6 months to cite us and penalize us, to go ahead and cite us and penalize us. Okay, they have up to 6 months. And then we do have a right to an appeals process. As you notice here, we have up to 15 days to go ahead and advise them that we're going to go ahead and either ask for an informal conference or that we're going to be filing an appeal. Okay, so or to ask for a review. Okay. All right, great. So, you know, and then let's go back to MSHA, right? You know, what is MSHA doing basically? They have to inspect underground mines, okay, in their entirety, you know, at least 4 times a year. So each mine is going to be inspected at least 4 times a year. As you see, they're a little more aggressive, right? Surface mines are inspected at least 2 times a year. So surface wise, but underground are going to be at least 4 times a year. All right. OSHA also, MSHA also has the authority under certain conditions to order an operator to withdraw miners from all or part of the mine. So whereas OSHA may ask us to stop work, MSHA has the authority to withdraw those workers from out of the mine. Okay, miners who have to stop work by that kind of order, they're entitled to receive compensation. So that means that the employer still has to pay them at the regular rate of pay. Okay, for whatever the specified work times were, and then all the miners in affected areas have to be withdrawn except the ones that are necessary to eliminate a hazard. So if employees need to stay, let's say for an emergency shutdown, right, or for any other reason to control a hazard, well, then those employees at the moment would not be withdrawn, okay, unless it's just imminent danger. Also, public officials whose duties require that their presence in the area, representatives of the miners that are qualified to make mine examinations, and then consultants as well. Okay, so those, if they do a withdrawal, those are usually the only people that will stay behind or enter the mine after withdrawal's been done. Okay. And then other situations where MSHA may issue a withdrawal order. Here's some examples for you, right? First of all, like I said, it's imminent danger is the most common one. Okay, and then also during a follow-up inspection, if they find that the mine operators maybe fail to abate, or correct certain hazards or violations, right? And then they have to, MSHA has to issue a withdrawal order, until the violation's abated, right? So basically until the violation is corrected. If a miner fails to abate a breathable dust violation for when they've been cited, and their period's expired, they may withdraw the miners as well. Also, if two violations make up unwarrantable failures, right, to comply with the standards. So, so if they're not correcting standards, they may be withdrawn. OSHA may be forced them or the employer to withdraw those miners out of there. And then also miners might be ordered to withdraw from a mine, if they haven't received the safety training that they're required. Anybody who's not familiar with MSHA training, there are two different types of training that miners get, and it's parts 46 and part 48. So let me pull it up for you really quickly, and you see the topics there in that 40 hour of instruction. Okay, so it's MSHA part 46 training, which part 46 is more of a it's more of the starter orientation. Maybe that's the best way to explain it. And then the second one is part 48, which is more in depth. Okay, so this planning guide is more of a generalized, new miners, right? New tasks, small servicing companies, items like that. And then the more detailed training is going to be part 48 training. And part 48 training is going to be the more in-depth training for coal miners. Okay, so excuse me. There you go. And part 48, even the qualifications for trainers are going to be much more stringent as well. Okay. All right. And then if you see on the right hand side, you see there they have to have that 8-hour refresher training. Okay. They're going to have 40 hours of instruction for underground miners, or anything from miners' rights to the use of self-rescue and respiratory devices, hazard recognition, escape ways, walk around training, more like an orientation, right? Or look-see, emergency procedures, basic ventilation, basic roof controls, electrical hazards, first aid, safety and health aspects of a task assignment as well. And then you'll see there they have also the listing of the 24-hour training as well, right? And then remember this, right, that all mine operators, they're required to immediately report accidents to the nearest MSHA office, okay? So with OSHA reporting and recording, you have 8 hours to report a fatality from when it happened, and you have 24 hours to report a hospitalization with OSHA, okay? All right, so let's go ahead and keep on moving forward. MSHA, right? What did it define, as accidents? Okay, this is what their definition of accidents, incidents, injuries include all of these, right? Unplanned flood of a mine, okay, by some type of liquid or gas, a fatality in a mine, an injury to an individual at a mine, that has a reasonable potential to result in the worker's death. So significant injury, maybe the employee's in a death or a coma or something like that, right? Severely incapacitated, maybe. An injury that might result in death. Entrapment for more than 30 minutes. So if minors get entrapped for more than 30 minutes, they got to advise MSHA. Okay. An unplanned ignition or explosion of a gas or dust. Also, an unplanned fire not extinguished within 30 minutes of its discovery. So if employees get in there and incipient fire, they can actually fight a fire for up to 30 minutes before the employer's got to advise MSHA. Let's see, an unplanned fire not extinguished within 30 minutes, like we just talked about. An unplanned ignition or explosion of a blasting agent or any type of explosive. An unplanned roof fail. In active work areas, right, where the roof bolts are used, or the roof that impairs ventilation or impedes passage, right? So when the roof fails, all of a sudden now ventilation starts to fail or has failed, and then also nobody's allowed to pass through, right? The passage is impeding on it. Also, cold and rock outbursts that could cause withdrawal from miners and disrupt any type of mining activity. Unstable conditions at an impoundment or refuse pile, right? Comb bank also, and then also damage to existing equipment in the shaft, right? So where it interferes with the use of equipment for more than 30 minutes as well. So as you see, yeah, Jason, I'm sorry, I just saw gravel pits as well. Yeah, good call, man. And the gravel pits, it depends, right? It may be you talking about surface or subsurface? Yeah, surface, huh? Yeah, that's where usually most of them are. That's why they'll wind up doing a lot of. I think it's part 48, if I'm not mistaken, which is the one that's not a deep mine. Okay, underground is more part 48, and it's a little bit more stringent. Okay. So sorry, I'm just seeing. Had my head buried in the books. I don't know how long you had that message up there. Okay, so you see how much time they spend it on MSHA, right, folks? We've spent a lot of time on OSHA, but you see what they spent on MSHA, right? So let's talk about EPA a little bit, right? So EPA, what are we talking about, right? The Environmental Protection Agency, right? Look when it was established, 1970, right? Right around the same time as OSHA, okay? So EPA and employee safety pretty much came into effect right around the same time, all right? And then also you see that MSHA in 1977, but they already had a presence from the 40s on. There was kind of a different division that would do it, okay? All right. So in 1970, what we do, right, is that, basically what's the EPA's mission is to basically protect human health, right, and to safeguard it. So the EPA's mission is to protect human health for the public's health. And then remember, OSHA's job and MSHA's job is to protect the employee. Okay. We basically adopted a lot of the OSHA standards. So, safety technician, we have to have a working knowledge of some EPA laws, right? We have to know, and here are many of the type of credentials, or I'm sorry, not the credentials, the regulations, right? So we have the Comprehensive Environmental Response Compensation Liability Act. Basically, what it does, it imposes liabilities on owners or operators, right, of a facility where there's going to be a release of hazardous substance into the environment. Also, RCRA, they call it RCRA. It's Resource Conservation and Recovery Act. The law regulates the generation, treatment, and storage of hazardous waste. And basically, RCRA, what it requires is the owner operator of a facility to undertake corrective actions to clean up a facility under the Treatment, Storage, and Disposal Hazardous Waste Act. And then there's also a complex permit program, right, where the owner operator has to comply with. Let me ask you folks out there, who's been HAZWOPER trained before? Anybody? Okay. Okay, yeah, you see a few of you have, right? So I want to explain this about HAZWOPER. HAZWOPER, a lot of people think is an OSHA standard. HAZWOPER is not an OSHA standard. What happened is it's hazardous waste operations or hazardous materials. OSHA actually adopted it, and that's how we wound up with HAZWOPER. HAZWOPER is actually part of this RCRA, okay, this RCRA, uh, Resource Conservation Recovery Act. And part of that standard was talking about employee training and health and safety of the public, and that's where the 1910 120 hazardous waste hazardous operations or hazardous materials standard came from. Okay, so just so you know. And then of course HAZWOPER, right, which is stand for hazardous waste operations, right? Okay. Also underground storage tanks, right? Under RCRA and under federal and state control, right? Also imposing that operating, reporting, financial assurance, okay, of any type of company cleanup obligations on persons or companies, right? So a lot of this will fall back to how many of you have heard of with RCRA, the cradle to grave? Basically, a company owns a barrel or a company owns any type of materials, like any vessel you put the material in, from the time they produce it to the time it dies. Okay, they call it cradle to grave. Let me show you really quickly, folks. Okay, let's see. Okay, this is basically what you're talking about right here. Okay, it gives the EPA the authority to control hazardous waste from cradle to grave. Okay, basically it holds the organization accountable for whoever's it is. Yeah, so let me use an example. Let's say it's a Chevron barrel of oil, right? Or a Shell barrel of oil. And that barrel of oil is found 20 years later sitting in the middle of I-10 or Interstate 10 or Interstate 20. And all of a sudden they have to get a hazmat team out. That bill is probably going to Shell. Unless Shell can prove who that lot, or Chevron, unless they can prove who that lot or who that barrel was sold to, they're probably just going to have ownership of it. Okay. So that's why it's so important to know lots, unit numbers, items like that. Okay. Also, like I said, underground storage tank regulations that I mentioned just a moment ago. And then the Clean Air Act, right? Basically talking about emissions now. It's basically a complex, multi-phase statute. It's designed to regulate air emissions from stationary and mobile sources, right? So we're talking about, in order to control air pollution, they'll wind up having different emission caps. Okay, the Clean Water Act, the act, what it does is it prohibits the discharge of any pollutants from point sources, storm water, right, into any type of navigable waters. So if it's a navigable water, it'll be under the jurisdiction of the U.S. and the U.S. Coast Guard. And it's basically an imposed liability on anybody who's responsible for the operation of equipment that results in any type of discharge like that. Okay. And then you see the Safe Drinking Water Act, right? The act basically imposes federal drinking water standards, okay, on virtually any public water system. Okay. The act requires the establishment of drinking water standards for maximum contamination levels. So who's seen like all this stuff going on in Flint, Michigan, right? We have, all the risk right now going on, or all the concerns with the Dakota pipeline, right? Or the, what's the other one? The Dakota pipeline. I can't remember the name of the other one right now offhand, where there's a risk of that they're going underneath water sources, right? So there you go. That's basically another agency that'll be regulating as well. Okay, and then toxic substance control basically governs the manufacturing use of any type of chemical products, importing and exporting the chemicals. How they're regulated under the act as well. Okay, all the way down to specific regulations regarding the use, management, and storage and disposal of PCBs, right? Polychlorinated biphenyl materials. And I think we talked about this a couple weeks ago. We were talking about PCBs. So let me pull it up for you real quick. And what happens is they were kind of like beads, right? PCBs, let's see, used a lot in like transformers and stuff. And the reason the government got rid of it, just like asbestos, they don't want it used anymore, is because they're concerned about PCBs. Is that they never disintegrate. I think they said it's over 100 years for PCBs to go ahead and go away. And basically, where they would put them, they would put these PCBs were primarily in transformers. Okay, that was primarily where they were found. Okay, before they started using whatever hydraulic fluid or whatever the hydrocarbon is now that they use in there to keep those transformers cool down. Okay, so anybody who's looking for it, just go ahead and Google PCBs EPA, and it'll give you a whole pretty much breakdown of it. Okay, and we're going to talk about it a little bit more anyway. Okay, all right. So, and then the last of all, right, is the Oil Pollution Act of 1990. And basically, the act, what it do is it puts on strict liability, right, on responsible parties for the removal, costs, and damages resulting from any discharges of oil into navigable waters, right? Again, usually regulated by the U.S. Coast Guard. And then any owner operator of an offshore facility that resulted in a discharge would also be considered the responsible party, right? So who realized out there that who realized that we had that many federal agencies that are covering us on health, safety, and environmental over the road in mines? I mean, you're talking about a good bit of responsibilities, huh? You know, we often think OSHA, but we don't think about all these other standards and regulations that take place as well. Okay. Okay, cool. Okay, so let's keep on moving, right? So let's talk a little bit about driver's license programs and then items that we know, right? Certain commercial vehicles, certain commercial motor vehicles, right? CMVs. We know that for heavy construction, they require special skill or knowledge to be able to transport them. Also, prior to the implementation of any type of CDL program, right? In a number of states and in Washington, D.C., any person that's licensed to drive an automobile could also legally drive heavy equipment, track and trailer, or even a bus. Okay, so even in many of those states that did have the classified system, the classified licensing system, the person's skills weren't tested, right, on the type of vehicle that he or she was driving. So as a result, what happened? That a lot of them were operating those vehicles and they weren't qualified to do so, right? They weren't able to, basically. And then what it lead to? Serious accidents, right? So fortunately, what happened because of the CDL programs, it's no longer the case. Okay, so now it's been again the CDL programs or the commercial driver's license program. Basically, what it's done is standardize the safety measures over the road now. Okay, so allowing only qualified drivers now to get behind the wheel. Okay, so basically, safety technicians, things that we're gonna have to know is that we have to be responsible for the CDL rules, right? Making sure that we stay abreast of regulations that might affect our company. We also need to make sure that any worker operating any type of heavy equipment or any type of other commercial vehicle has a current license, right? They're going to have the current, and they're also going to have the correct endorsements, right? And then we also have to know the regulatory requirements that's established by the DOT, right? The Department of Transportation, commercial driver's license program, and the standards that are set by the CMV, right? The Commercial Motor Vehicle Safety Act as well. Also, in addition to that, we have with that act, right, with the 1986 Act, what we like I said, what we do, we removed right those many of those unsafe drivers from the highways, right, either unsafe or unqualified drivers from the highways, right. Okay, and then the act also retained the state's right to issue a driver's license, but also it put a national standard on the states that they have to meet when licensing commercial motor vehicle drivers. So what's a big part of that now is basically being part of the national registry now, right? Okay. All right. So let's go ahead. I'm gonna keep us going on this right now. Also, the act would do it. It made it illegal to hold more than one license by requiring states to adopt testing and licensing standards for truck and bus drivers. So basically, prior to, if let's say a driver could have driver's licenses in multiple states, so they may be getting all their tickets or all of their infractions on one DWIs, right, or infractions on the vehicle, and then all of a sudden they're staying insured and driving on the other one. So basically, and I'll tell you a big thing that really fixed a lot of this was the evolution of the internet. Okay, the evolution of the internet and computer systems definitely started to curb some of this, so that employees couldn't have all these multiple licenses and keep on pinning all their stuff and hiding it in certain states and still driving in other states with a license. Okay, and then the act basically made it illegal, like I said, to hold more than one license, right? And then also, in addition to that, it helped verify that person's ability to operate that specific vehicle or that type of vehicle. It also cut back on the number of drivers with multiple traffic tickets, right? Because basically they may have been suspended in one state and not in the other. So once they started merging all these driving records, they basically suspended them from the other states as well. Okay. Also, drivers can only have one license. They can't register in another state. Once they've accumulated a certain number of citations, in order to have a clean record. So they won't just allow them to switch states in order to basically wash their driver's license. Okay, it's important to note that the act doesn't require drivers to obtain separate federal license. There's no such thing as a federal license. So one state, any state, will have reciprocity with all their states now, and they basically go registered together. Okay, but there's no federal driver's license. Okay. Also, in addition to that, it only requires states to upgrade their existing testing and licensing program if it's deemed necessary, and to conform with minimum standards. One of the outcomes of the act was that drivers they've been required to have a CDL in order to drive a commercial motor vehicle, right? Uh, in order to drive a commercial vehicle since 1992. Okay, the Federal Highway Administration, part of the DOT as well. That what they do is they develop an issued standard for testing, right, licensing for commercial motor vehicles. So on top of all those things, the standards, what they do, they're required the states to issue a CDL, right, to the commercial motor vehicle drivers only after the driver passed the knowledge and skill test that was administered by the state related to the type of vehicle. So they want to know what type of vehicle you have, right? What's the gross weight on the vehicle? Does it have air brakes? Does it not have air brakes? Do you have a passenger endorsement? So these are all questions that they'll be asking. Among other things, also the standards what they're required is to issue a CDL, to any of those commercial driver vehicles, right, that we're talking about, only after the driver passed that knowledge and skill-based test. Okay, they needed commercial driver's license if they were in interstate or intrastate work. So basically, as long as they're on the highway system, whether they're in the state or they're crossing state lines, right, interstate or intrastate, within one state. Let's say they're in early Texas, it doesn't matter. They're using the federal highway system, so we can't. So we have to make sure that they're adequately licensed, right? And then, in addition to that, we need to make sure that they meet the following classifications for a commercial motor vehicle. A Class A license, what are we talking about, right? It's a combination of any vehicles with a gross weight of over 26,001 pounds, okay? It provides a gross unloaded vehicle weight, right, of being 10,000 pounds of the unloaded weight. Also, Class B, any single vehicle with a gross weight of more than 21,000 pounds again, okay? Or any towing vehicle, right? That's not in excess of 10,000 pounds. And then last of all, also Class C, right? Any single vehicle or combination of vehicles that doesn't meet the definition of A or B, and then they'll be designated as a C, and they're designated to transport 16 or more passengers, okay, including the driver. So basically, 16 or more passengers. What they're basically talking about is how many of you out there have heard about? I've heard of like a passenger endorsement. You have a chauffeur's license, right? That can drive up to. I thought it used to be 14. I guess it's 15 now. So chauffeur, yeah, exactly. So chauffeur's license, right, in Louisiana, basically is a Class D license, and you can. I thought it used to be 14 passengers. I guess it must be 15 passengers now. And then the next thing you get would be a Class C, which would be that it would be a chauffeur's license, but it's actually what you're. I mean, excuse me, a CDL driver's license, and basically what you're looking at is having it's called a passenger endorsement on it. Okay, you may have a passenger endorsement on it. You may have a tow truck endorsement on it. You might have an air brakes endorsement on it. Okay, depends on what you test for. Okay. And then endorsements or restrictions as well. And that's what I was talking about, right? Drivers who operate special vehicles need to pass additional tests in order to properly be licensed. So basically, the commercial driver's license, first of all, through the state that you get it in, it's kind of like the base, right? It's kind of like the base, and then you go adding the endorsements that you want on it, okay? So that way you basically have your base driver's license, and then you add endorsements to it as well, okay? Does anybody out there online tonight drive a motorbike? Okay. All right. A couple of you do. Don't you have to have a motorbike endorsement also on your driver's license? Okay. Yeah. Do you? Okay. So good. That's what I'm talking about, folks. Right. So the ones that are online tonight, we can't. Anybody who wants to ride a motorbike, you can't just go grab a motorbike. You have to go. You have to take a driving test also, or is it just a written test when you first got it? Okay. Yeah, I thought so. Okay. Good. Okay, yeah, folks. So you have to do the written test, and then you also have to do the drive. Basically, compared to a power industrial trucks, right? Basically, you're going to do the driving test, the knowledge test, and then you're going to do the evaluation, right? So kind of compared to a power industrial truck, maybe that's kind of the best way to compare it. Okay. Okay. So let's go ahead and keep on going. So look at the grandfather provision. We know that very little gets grandfathered in, right? But let's talk about it. Drivers with good driver records, they might be grandfathered in, all right? Or at the time, they may have been grandfathered in from the skill set according to the following criteria. The driver has a current driver's license at the time of application, right? So if it's not current, and then they're gonna be basically considered a new applicant. Okay. Driver has a good driving record and previously passed an acceptable skills test. Okay, so at some point you must have passed some skills test to get that driving record and to get that license or endorsement. The driver has a good driving record in combination with certain driving experience as well, right? So we'll make sure that driver is an active driver as well. And then in order for driver's record to be considered good, the driver has to verify that during the 2-year period immediately prior to the applying for the CDL, they didn't have more than one license, right? So going back to not having more than one license in more than one state. They had to have not had any licenses suspended, revoked, or canceled. Also, haven't had any convictions, right? Any type of convictions, any offenses that are related to motor vehicles, basically hit and run, right? DWI, items like that. Haven't had more than one conviction for serious traffic violation while operating any type of motor vehicle as well. Also, haven't had any type of violation of a state or local or relating to motor vehicle traffic control, right, in connection with any type of traffic accident, and then having no record of an accident in which they were at fault. So, by meeting all of those 6 standards, is when they allowed us to is allowed well not me but allowed people to go ahead and grandfather in some of their driving endorsements. Okay. And then commercial driver's license again, right? What are we talking about, right? Any state that determines the state determines the license fee. The state determines the driver's license renewal cycle. Okay, most renewal procedures, right? They continue to decide our age, our medical condition, any other driver qualifications, right? For interstate or intrastate work. So basically, to make sure that we're still fit to drive, right? Just like being fit to duty, that we're still fit to drive as well. Okay. And then, as many of you know now, and I'm not sure about a CDL, folks, but most of us know now that in Louisiana, right, the ones that are in Louisiana tonight, we used to have a 4-year driver's license. Now we have what, a 6-year driver's license, right? I think they just extended it to 6 years now. So I think I was the last one that had a 4-year driver's license, which was last year or something like that. Okay. Or the year before. Okay. And then all CDLs must contain the following information, right? So commercial driver's licenses, they have to have this information. They have to have the word CDL on it. If it doesn't say commercial driver's license, it's not a commercial driver's license, okay? It's got to have the driver's full name, signature, and address, right? So do most of our passenger endorsements or regular class, whatever it is, class A driver's licenses as well. Also, we have to have our date of birth, our sex on there, and our height. Color photograph, right, or some type of digital image of us. Also, the driver's state license number. The name of the issuing state. What state was it issued in? Texas, Oklahoma, Louisiana, New Mexico, Arkansas, Florida, whatever, right? And then also the date of issuance and the date that it's going to expire. It's got to have both the date we issued it and the date it expires, right? The classes of the vehicles that we're authorized to drive. Okay. The notation, whether we have an air brake restriction or if we have an air brake endorsement, right? And then the endorsements that we have as a qualified driver, like I was talking about earlier. And then states might also issue learner's permits, right, for purposes of behind the wheel training on public highways, right? As long as there's another licensed permitted CDL driver in the vehicle. So almost like you're talking about when we're talking about young children, right, or young kids with a driver's permit, it's kind of like the same thing with adults as well, right? We need to have a learner's permit because we're learning how to be adequately trained for that new function, okay? And then waiver provisions as well. Any active duty military drivers were waived from the CDL requirements. So basically, any military personnel, they're just going to have a driver's license if necessary. They don't have to go, if they're driving, let's say, a commercial vehicle for the U.S. military, they're not required to have a CDL. Okay, and that, folks, just so you know, same thing with the crane standard, right? Is the way they do training as well. They're a little looser about it. It's because in an effort to protect national security, they can't hold the military to that same standard. Because what happens? All of a sudden, you're running a mission, right? You're running a response, and or anything else in this country or another country, and all of a sudden, oh, you don't have enough qualified drivers because nobody has a driver's license on them. Okay, so that's why that kind of flies the way it does. Okay, and then in addition to that, also, a state may also waive the CDL knowledge and skills testing required for any type of seasonal drivers for farm-related services and industries, and they waive certain knowledge and skills training requirements for drivers in remote areas of like Alaska. Okay, I think it's just so desolate that they've kind of laxed the regulations a little bit. To be honest with you, I don't know anybody who's had a CDL waived. But then again, I don't live in super rural areas, and I definitely don't visit Alaska. Okay, or at least haven't. And then, of course, an endorsement test requirement, right, for full-time drivers working in any type of pyrotechnics. Also, they're subject to certain conditions, okay? So they may be subject to other certain conditions because of the significant risk, okay? So remember that there's several legal requirements, right, or other requirements that are related to a commercial driver's license, right, and that they might affect the commercial drivers, their employers, the states, or any other type of CDL programs. Penalties, right? Let's say the federal penalty to a driver who violates a CDL requirement, it's going to be a civil penalty of up to $2,500. Okay. In aggravated cases, like criminal cases, it could be up to $5,000 in fines. Okay. And an employer is also subject to a penalty. The employer is also subject up to the penalty of up to $10,000, and if he or she knowingly uses the driver to operate a commercial vehicle without a CDL. So imagine you allow someone to drive a vehicle without a CDL, you're looking at up to $10,000 on the fine. So I'll give you a perfect example of this. Who remembers? I know that most of you on tonight are on from Louisiana. Recently, I guess right after the Baton Rouge floods, they had a truck with a lot of non-documented workers that was traveling from Slidell or Slidell or St. Tammany to Baton Rouge to go work the flood. And it was non-documented workers on the bus. It was like 30 or 40 non-documented workers, and the bus, it was an old Avis rental bus or something like that, or Hertz rental bus that was painted all black or charcoal gray. Does anybody remember that? And it killed the firemen on the uh, on the bridge going over the basin, not of the spillway from Kenner to La Place. Okay, yeah. So that's a perfect example, right? So let's say, let me see, spillway bus accident, right? Um, Driver. Let's see. Right here. No, that wasn't it. I'm sorry. It was Louisiana. It was. It was. This was last year, if I'm not mistaken, right? And Baton Rouge floods workers right here. This bus crash. That's what I'm talking about right here, folks. There's the bus, right? It was like an old, like I said, it was like an old Hertz bus or something like that. And there was a driver, non-documented worker, non-CDL. Okay, so excuse me. There you go, non-worker, non-CDL, and that was the vehicle, right? Killed, I think he killed one and injured two, and knocked them off. And there's a picture of the aftermath. There's a picture of the aftermath. Supposedly the brakes, there's some bigger issues there. The employer supposedly hadn't verified documentation of the employees. And then in addition to that, also supposedly now the driver had said that the brakes had failed also. So, really, I don't know, but supposedly that's what they said. It was that the brakes had failed. Okay. Okay, and then so let's go ahead and move on. So that's that penalty, and then the let's see, the CDLIS, the clearinghouse. Okay, the CDL clearinghouse. States have to be connected to the commercial driver's license information system. So why is that? That's so people can no longer get multiple driver's licenses in different states. They get suspended in Louisiana. You don't want them to go in and get a driver's license in Texas or Mississippi, right? They get suspended in Tennessee. You don't want them crossing over to Missouri or to Missouri over to Georgia or something, going to get a driver's license. Okay. Who realized that was in effect already? The clearinghouse, where the states were interconnected now. hmm And then it affects things like DWI, right? Point systems in Florida as well, where your driver's license point systems as well. And insurance companies are sometimes involved in it as well. So for insurability purposes, right? Trying to move from one state to another. Also, blood alcohol content standards. What are we talking about? Federal Highway Administration, right? Part of the DOT, they established that 0.04 as a blood alcohol concentration level for a commercial motor vehicle carrier. Whereas most states, right, with a blood alcohol level normally is like a 0.08, all the way up to a 0.1, right? For non-commercial drivers. For commercial drivers, there's a lower tolerance. It's a 0.04. You're probably talking about one beer. Okay. And from my understanding, I think minors, if I'm not mistaken, Louisiana, I might be wrong. It's either 0.04, but I thought it was a 0.02 for people under the age of like I think it's 0.04 for people under the age of like 21, and people for under the age of 18 or 16, it's like a 0.02. So it's significantly lower. Okay. A lot of people don't realize that we have those fluctuating blood alcohol levels. Okay. Employee notification within 30 days of a conviction, right, for any traffic violation, except parking. The driver's got to notify the employer regarding of the nature of the violation and the type of vehicle that was driven at the time. So, now, I'll be honest with you. I don't know if this is for CDL only. I'm thinking this is CDL only, but I may be wrong. But imagine you get a DWI, right? Somebody gets a DWI in your own personal vehicle. Now you're reporting it obviously to the employer, right? And we're having to advise them of the violation. Okay, it really doesn't specify whether it is the violation or the conviction. Okay, if a driver's license is suspended, revoked, or canceled, if the employee is disqualified from driving, the Federal Highway Administration has then the Federal Highway Administration is going to notify the employer. Okay, so the thing is, and remember, this is wise because these CDL drivers are going to be registered within the system for the employer. Okay, and then notification has to be made by the end of the next business day, right? Following the receipt of the notice of suspension, revocation, cancellation, lost privileges, disqualification. We don't want these drivers on the road, obviously, because obviously they're not in good compliance, right? Not in good standing. Also, the employers they can, if they make known, they may not knowingly use a driver who's had more than one license, right? Whose license has been suspended, revoked, or disqualified, and then basically violation of the regulation might result in civil criminal penalties as well. It might be perjury, folks. So definitely want to watch it nowadays. With the new age of computers and internet technology, it's it's best to play it safe and just become forthcoming about it, right? And then disqualifications. The following, there are lists of reasons why we may be disqualified out of the CDL program. If we're convicted while driving a commercial vehicle, or if we're being convicted while driving a motor vehicle, two or more serious traffic violations within a 3-year period, one or more violations of an out-of-state order within a 10-year period as well, driving under the influence of a controlled substance or driving under the influence of alcohol, leaving the scene of an accident, hit and run basically, right? Using a commercial motor vehicle to commit a felony, using a commercial vehicle to commit a felony involving a manufacturing, distributing, dispensing of any type of controlled substances, So if any of those come into play, it's going to be probably reasons why our driver's license would wind up being disqualified. Okay, and then just remember this, right? Basically, as safety technicians or let's call it just safety professionals, period, because most of us don't have a safety technician title. Okay, on a construction site, um, Our responsibility is important, right? We're responsible for conducting safety inspections, right? Creating job safety plans, organizing and conducting safety training, investigating and maintaining records of accidents, incidents, injuries, and illnesses. Also, we're responsible for knowing how to prevent accidents and understanding how they might affect accident costs on our company, right? Additional important part of our job is to understand government regulations also that are going to require us to be followed on the work site, including the DOT and these commercial driver's license programs that we're talking about right now. So look, folks, that's it. That is everything. I guess we pretty much got it on the buzzer. It's about 1:45 right now. That's it for the night. If you look, the questions on the next page, right, 1.16. There you go. There are your 10 questions. Like I said earlier, much of the tests of these ended module tests, many of them are conducted are really similar to the questions that you see in the backs of the books. Okay, so it's definitely good. Plus, we'll be doing refreshers as well. Okay, and then we'll be doing those evaluations. Did everybody get a copy of the handwritten answer keys that I had for this book? I sent them out last week, and I think I sent them out the week before, but I'm not sure everybody got them. Did y'all get those? Let me show you real quickly for anybody who's still on the line tonight. Let me see. Let's see. Okay, this is one right here, folks, that you would have gotten. Let me see. This is one that you would have gotten like this. It's typeset. That's for the first book, for the field safety book. Okay, and then let me see the second one really quickly. Let's see. The second one was typed, and let's do CSST answers. Give me 1 second. I'm gonna check and see who's in there right now. Would have been this one right here, folks. Okay, you should have had this. I'll resend it to y'all just in case, okay? So I'll resend it to y'all tonight. Sorry it's not typed and nice and pretty like the last one, but we just have not been able to get to it yet. But there you go. That way you have all the answers, and you see we'll have them done by module number, okay? So let's go ahead and shut it down, folks. 1:15. We will see you on Tuesday. If anybody's got any questions, feel free to reach out. Let me look really quickly at next week. Next week, the module's pretty short, okay? We only got about 14 pages. So we may, and the second one is only like 12 pages. I think the next week, it may work out a little bit faster for us. I think we're going to pick up a little bit of steam. So we may try to get a little aggressive and get through 2 modules, okay? Y'all have a great weekend, folks, and I'll talk to y'all next week, okay? Thank you.